Hello to you and welcome. I am Matt Nantel, Fortinet pre-sales security expert. I am joined today by Guylain, SWAT team SE manager at Fortinet. Guylain, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mathieu. What about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. So today, Guylain, we're going to be talking about remote access points in teleworker configurations.
That is correct, Mathieu. So there's a big need right now for teleworkers, and I have that need. I've been sent home for the next 3 weeks to a month. So one of the solutions that I need is to be able to connect back to the office as if I was in the office, but with multiple devices. I do need wireless access to do my daily work, email, and so on the corporate network. I have a need for an IP phone. I don't want to use my cell all those days, and I want to be able to connect with my coworker. And I have some inbound call on our corporate line as well that needs to terminate on that IP phone. And because I'm part of the admin team also at corporate, I have a wired laptop in order to go to our server network back at work. So it is a pretty complex solution that needs more than just a VPN client on all my device, which would be almost impossible to do with many of them. So one of the solutions we want to highlight today is a small remote AP. In fact, any of our customer that has a FortiGate, which there's millions out there, they basically just need to add one of those AP to their network, and their user can work from home as if they would be in the office.
So the device will establish a tunnel, like a VPN, right?
Correct. So the device normally would sit on your corporate network and would establish that tunnel using a protocol called CAPWAP to the FortiGate. In this case, we're going to go over the internet. And so we need to have a private tunnel. So not only will have a CAPWAP tunnel for controlling the AP, but we will also have a need for encryption
Okay.
in order to protect the data privacy.
Okay, good. So, what are we going to be setting up today? Is the access point the only component for our solution?
Well, back at corporate, you already have a firewall,
Yes, I
which
do. Yes.
many of our account already has. So the idea is to basically enable on your WAN side, because I'm going to be coming in from the WAN side, you're going to enable a protocol called CAPWAP. And I will connect this AP to the internet. So I basically received this AP out of the box. We're going to connect this AP. So as you can see here on the diagram at the bottom of the screen, the remote AP is sitting with me right now. And that remote AP will basically have three connections. One to the WAN, connecting to the internet and establishing that internet or tunnel to the FortiGate. And then, as I mentioned, there's going to be an SSID called Corp Wi-Fi to establish for my laptop wirelessly. My phone will be bridged to the local WAN. There's no need to go back on that tunnel all the way to the FortiGate, since our cloud voice over IP solution is not in the office. It actually sits in the public space. And then my wired laptop, as you can see, needs to have access to the secure server that is on top of your screen. That's right.
Right. Okay. And they're in the same subnet here, so we'll have to devise something. Fortunately for you, I think I already have a plan in my mind, right? So we've got this schema that explains the various components that we intend to connect, right? So we have a teleworker with a wireless endpoint, a VoIP phone, and a wired endpoint. And so if we take them from the top here, the wireless endpoint, we're going to want them to be able to access the intranet server, right? So the moment he connects to a specific SSID over wireless, we'll be using 802.1x for that. Then that client should be able to reach the intranet server. If we move over to the VoIP phone, then the VoIP phone needs to be able to access the cloud VoIP server. For that, what we'll be doing here is just bridging this device to the WAN port, right? And then finally, the wireless endpoint, we're going to be, the wired endpoint. Let's move on to the wired endpoint. There we go. We need to be able to connect a device that will be connected to that access point of yours, right? So that access point has actual wired ports on it?
Correct. So there's a number of model. In fact, any APs that you get from us does support the remote AP functionality that we described here today. The difference between different AP is that this one has a number of ports. Actually, it was made for the hospitality networks, or a lot of a hotel or school dorm would use that AP.
Right.
So this one is the U24JEV. It has a WAN port in the back. Let me see if I can zoom in so that you can properly see. Yep. So the WAN port is in the back. And then underneath, you have 3 ports that we'll be using today. The very first one is the yellow one. And yellow, it's because this port can provide PoE out. So the AP will be powered by my local network here. So PoE in the back, and we'll provide PoE out to the phone system so that I don't need to have an AC adapter and so on. And then the next 2 port, we're going to use the third one in this case, and I'm going to connect my wired station to that port.
Right.
And therefore, I'm going to have now a bridge to my secure server network. And then finally, another port is the 2 radio that are part of that AP, one for 2.4 gig and one for 5 gig. So any device that I have at home could connect to the wireless using 802.1x for authentication and allowing me to be virtually in the office.
Okay, cool. So I think we might as well just get started here with the configuration. I think we have a lot of pre-configuration already made for us here, obviously, but we'll be covering some of the configuration requirements live, right? So I think the first step is to go in and make sure that that access point knows where to find my FortiGate, right? So that would be through cloud, right?
Right. So the last thing you want, if you have a bunch of people like me that's going to work from home, is to have to pre-configure all those AP one by one.
Yeah.
So we have a number of tools that will allow you to deploy those AP right out of the box without the IT admin to pre-configure them. So by leveraging the FortiAP cloud, those AP will reach out to the cloud into your account. Mm-hmm. In fact, you'll import what we call the FortiCloud key, which I'm going to show right here. It's always on the top of every APs. By entering that FortiCloud key, the AP, when it reached the internet, will register into your account. It is worth noting that an account in FortiAP Cloud is totally free. Anyone can register for one of them. And so once the AP is in that account, I guess you're going to show us how you can deploy that AP externally to your FortiGate.
So we already have an AP inside our AP inventory here. One I've already deployed and configured, and I did undeploy that a moment ago. So we'd be having 2 options here to deploy that AP. We'd be either using the cloud access point controller, which allows you to control APs directly from our cloud interface, or you can deploy to an external access controller, which in our case is FortiOS, right?
Correct. And I'm glad you mentioned it is FortiOS, because one of the unique things in these days is that you might have the need to deploy very quickly, and ordering a new FortiGate might not be an option for you right now, but you could deploy a virtual machine of our FortiOS.
That's right.
So it's a VM of FortiGate that would instantly be online and allow you to connect those AP and manage them just the same way as a physical FortiGate.
I see. Yes, that would be certainly something that would speed up the process, especially in the current circumstances. All right, so heading to our FortiGate, I have a device that's already in place. This is my SE Lab environment, and so there's already a lot of configuration done on this device. It's being used for all sorts of testing. It is publicly exposed on the internet, and so. The first step for configuration would be for us to enable that communication, right? So,
correct. So the AP, since it will come in from the internet, you will go to your WAN interface, and that WAN interface, depending on the version of FortiOS that you're running, Mathieu, might have a service or an administrative access called CapWAP. This would be for all version prior to 6.4. Now, 6.4 is just around the corner, and you happen to be running 6.4 on your FortiGate right now.
Yes, I am.
So it is currently called Security Fabric Connection, and basically anything part of the security fabric would be using the CapWAP protocol. Those would be the AP, our switches, and so on.
So previously would be called CapWAP, which is what you see here. So security fabric connection is a combination of what was previously called CapWAP and FortiTelemetry. So it's just called security fabric nowadays. All right, so that's already been turned on, obviously, in our case here. So we'll just be hitting cancel on this, and the IP of that interface is obviously where we've routed the access points. The AP should be able to resolve address names also. So if you have a DNS host name instead of an IP address, you can use inside the cloud provisioning tool to do that, as opposed to the IP address configuration that we've used here. Other than that, this is going to establish a CapWAP tunnel, but is that tunnel going to be secure?
So at that point, normally the AP would be sitting on your corporate network. So while the control plane is protected or encrypted, the payload of the user is typically in clear text. What we want to do now, since we're coming on from the internet, this is not fine anymore. So we want to protect. There's two methods that you can protect your data. One is using DTLS, and the other one is using IPSec. The preferred method these days is to use IPSec, and the FortiGate is a very powerful device that can offload IPSec to our NP6.
Okay. Understood. So you might as well connect that access point, Guylain, at this stage.
Okay, so let's do that. Here we go. Connect the access point in the back. We have power coming on.
So that access point can, you mentioned that earlier, I think, but we're going to point it out again. So that AP receives PoE, but it can feed PoE to an additional device out of its yellow interface port, right?
Correct. So if you feed this AP with 802.3 AT, you will be able to output 802.3 AF to a device like an IP phone.
So we have to feed it 30 watts of power for it to be able to feed 15 watts of power on its port.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
In the meantime, what I'll do, Mathieu, if you don't mind, I will connect my laptop to the port that we will define to be bridged to the server network. And once my connection is done, we're going to go ahead and show the default AP profile that you need to configure in order to have that AP come online. So I'm going to connect the phone.
Sounds good.
On the PoE out. And as you can see, as I connect this phone, hopefully you can see the power. So once the AP power on and gets an IP address on my network here, it will try to reach FortiCloud. FortiCloud will redirect to your FortiGate. And then at that point, what you want to do, I guess, it's to automate the process. You don't want to have to configure every single AP of your Teleworker. You want to have a default AP profile that is going to start broadcasting and do different settings on your AP, the required settings. So one of them is the SSID. So it's always the name of the AP-default. That is the AP profile that's going to be taken once the AP is booted. And if you go ahead and edit that profile, you will see the 2 or 3 settings that are the most critical. The very first one is to say which SSID you want to broadcast. So there's 2 radios. You can see radio 1 is being your 2.4 gig and radio 2 being your 5 gig. So why don't you go ahead and walk us through how you would go about sending a new SSID to that profile?
So normally we'd be deploying this with radio resource provision. That setting basically tells the access point to select a channel. It will by default select a channel, even if that's not turned on, as long as you have them selected. But that feature allows the APs to reselect their channel over time, right? So depending on the adjacencies that they see, if you are living in a very crowded area, then you'll want the access point to perhaps change that decision once in a while, depending on what it can hear. The setting that you have here in terms of band, you would probably want to leave this to NG. That's the 2.4 gig radio. The 2.4 gigahertz radio is solely used for older devices nowadays, for the most part. It has a bit of a better range than the 5 gigahertz frequency itself from an RF standpoint. But from a band standpoint, you're going to be wanting to support the N and G clients for the most part. If you actually know that your teleworker is going to use a 5 gig capable device, I would venture that you'd want to actually disable this radio and make sure that he's actually using the 5 gig radio, especially if he's going to be working right adjacent to that access point. Because that 2.4 gig radio is, that frequency is very often packed in, especially if you live in a high density area. So making sure that you disable that, if you know that your clients are all 5 gig capable, is actually going to reduce the number of support questions you have based on poor access coverage, basically. So let's just configure the second radio, which is our good radio, and we'll be using ACN, and that's pretty much it. I don't think we're going to need to refer to require the A frequencies. It's going to be very adjacent to us. I think from a channel width standpoint, we're not going to need a lot of performance, so I think we'd be best off leaving that to 20 megahertz, short guard interval for performance purposes. And we'll be basically selecting all available channels here and let the access point pick one of them at this stage. There's no real need to lower the TX power, and then this is where we select the SSIDs that we want to advertise. So in our case, we already have an SSID called Corp Wi-Fi, which is pre-configured in my environment. And so we'll be turning that on and making sure that the access point is actually broadcasting that network. We'll come back to the LAN ports in a moment because I think we have some additional configuration to do for this. So let me just click OK on this. Let's go see if our access point is actually located our controller. And there it is. So notice that this AP is in waiting for authorization state, right?
That is correct. So that AP is now waiting for your FortiGate to authorize the tunnel to be established.
Right.
There's a couple of ways you could have decided to use this feature. One would be to auto-authorize any device that comes on your WAN port. I don't know that I would recommend that, and that means just about any APs that reach, that are Fortinet, that reach your WAN side would be automatically authorized. One way you could do is to pre-authorize. As you can see here, there's a create new on just above over there.
Yeah.
And if you would enter the serial number of all the devices that you've ordered, then you would be able to pre-authorize them. So that's almost like doing MAC authentication if you want.
I see.
Once the AP hit your FortiGate, it will look up in the database if the serial number is known. If it is known, then it would authorize. In our case, you're going to do this manually, Mathieu.
Okay, great. So I'm going to right click on this, and there we go, authorize. So while we are waiting for that, the process should take about 30 seconds. It goes through a disconnected phase first, and then it'll come back. We do have another SSID to configure because we have that scenario where a wired client has to be connecting to the remote secure server. So the best process to go through this is the one that's displayed on the screen here, which is to bridge that wired endpoint to an SSID. This might sound counterintuitive. An SSID is, after all, a wireless network, but we're basically going to use an SSID as a tunneling mechanism, right? So that it's in a separate area, if you will. I'm going to call this wired clients, and we're going to put this in the 192.168.74.0/24 subnet, like this. Turn on ping, just to make sure you can actually reach the device. Turn on the DHCP server, and we'll be calling this wired clients, but it's important to know we're not actually going to use this configuration here. We're just having to fill it from a security standpoint. We're going to be entering remote random keys in this, but we're actually not going to be broadcasting that SSID, nor are we going to be advertising it to any of our access points. We're going to be using this as a transport mechanism, again, for that wired client, right? So I click OK on this, and then let's take a quick peek at our access point, make sure it's dialed back in. There we go. We are online. We have one SSID that's advertised. Oh, I noticed, Guylain, that it's connected to Office Right port 6. Does that make sense, right?
That's pretty efficient, Mathieu. So right from your office, you can see through LLDP where my AP is currently connected in my lab. Most end user would have this terminated to the telco DMARC point or the internet provider,
Right.
and you might have or might not have LDP information, but in your case, you do see my switch here. That's right.
Excellent. So let's go back to that AP profile because we don't have the wired ports configured just yet. So inside the access point profile, we have a LAN port section. So that would be, we're going to create a custom configuration. So we have port 1, 2, and 3. So Guylain, you'll have to remind me which ones we're configuring for what purpose.
So I'm going to show that to you, Mathieu. Hopefully you can see here. So port 1 is, the label is on the port that is yellow, which is my PoE
right.
out. This is my phone, Mathieu. So you're going to want to bridge that to my WAN.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that the phone will obtain an IP address from the AP itself. It's going to bridge that to the WAN and go out to the internet directly without going on your side.
Okay, and I've already taken the liberty to configure the 2 other ports to be bridged to the wired client network.
Perfect.
Right? So again, that SSID is not an actual SSID. It's not being used because it's not, you can see that it's not being advertised here, for instance. I could technically advertise that network, but we're really choosing to separate the wired clients from the Wi-Fi clients first and foremost by doing this separately, right? So technically you could also put these clients inside the corp Wi-Fi network. But I prefer this isolation because this is using 802.1x, and as we'll see in a moment, wired clients is going to be using a captive portal for authentication in order to access the resources that are secured.
Let me, before you go down, one thing to note is on port 1, we could have selected NAT to WAN. Right. So one of the use case for NAT to WAN is that this AP could replace your demarcation point that has been provided by the internet provider at your home. And therefore, you would need to, if you have only one IP address coming on the WAN side, you would need to NAT all the devices that are wired behind. In my case, I'm not removing the demarcation point provided, and therefore I do not need to NAT from the AP, but that's one option that you could use.
Indeed, and that would also play the role of isolating those endpoints from anything that is connected to the external network. So a bit of a security feature at the same time, right? So if you're NATing, it generally means that you're not going to allow anything to come back, right? So that can be considered to play the role of an isolation feature at the same time. We'll leave it to bridge to WAN for now. It's going to give us the same result, I suspect, as far as the VoIP phone is concerned, right? So, all right. So now we have our profile configured. And if we look at our access point,
something has happened. My laptop here just suddenly get a network information. So I guess I just receive an IP address.
Possible. We'll have to take a look at that. So right now we have it is stating that its second radio is advertising the corp Wi-Fi network, right? So it has 0 clients at this point. So we'll take a look at the client section. So you've got the laptop connected currently over wireless or wired?
I have not connected the MacBook over wireless just yet. I was waiting for you to tell me that everything is fine. But I do have my wired connection that you bridge to your LAN port.
Okay, I think we're ready. So, and by that token, we're actually already seeing that device that's connected to the wired port, right? So it's on channel 0, which means that it's a wired client basically. So, yeah, I think, Guylain, you can go ahead and try and connect a wireless client.
Okay, so I don't know, maybe I can try to take this camera and show what's going on here. So, because I've just received an IP address, the Windows is prompting me if I want to allow PC to be discoverable. I'm just going to say no. So let's go.
Always say no to Windows.
Let's go and do an IP config to see what IP address I've received. Here we go. So I did receive 192.168.74.2 material. Is that the proper subnet I should have been on? Here.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So now tell me, why do I have this IP address and not the same thing as the wireless again?
Sure. So if we go back to the SSIDs that we had configured, I didn't point this out, but the Corp Wi-Fi network is addressed in the 73 network. So we have a different network that's been created for a wired client than from our wireless client. So a wireless client will come in with an address in this particular subnet, and a wired client will be coming in with an address in the alternate subnet. Let me just show this up here. It'll be easier. There we go. Right? So we have distinct networks. Your laptop is currently connected via wired, and that would be why it's getting an address in that network, right?
Okay, so if we go back to our map, that means
Yep.
that now my laptop should be able to access the server that is secure.
Your laptop is the wired endpoint, the device we're speaking of right now. The secure server, however, is actually secured, right? So we need to do a bit of a review on the policies first and foremost, because we have to remember that this is a policy device, right? So this remains a firewall. Now we've created a couple of objects here, but we haven't configured any policies just yet. So let's go back to our policies. I had placeholder policies already filled in here. So remote access point to internet and remote access point to LAN, right? So one thing to note is all the traffic is being tunneled right now. So this means that even your internet traffic is going to be flowing through my FortiGate device, right? So we'll be changing that placeholder interface with our Corp Wi-Fi and our wired client interface, and clicking apply. And that would normally give you basically remote access point to internet means you're going to get internet access, because this policy is going to my port 9, and it is NATing outbound, and it has a set of profiles applied for security purposes. And then the second policy here as a placeholder again for the source interface while we were configuring the actual in-use interface. And so we'll be taking the Corp Wi-Fi and the wired client interface, clicking those in, and that's to access the internal networks, right? So click OK on this. And there we are. And we also want to give access to that intranet server. The address is the 21 address, right? So note that we have two servers here, same subnet, 21 and 20. One of them is the secure server, the other one is the intranet server. The intranet server is okay to be accessed by anyone, so we want to make sure that this one's accessible at all times. But the secure server is something we want to secure, right? So that wired client that is actually connecting to the network and needs to reach that secure server, we want to be able to apply some security authentication to that client before we let him through, right? So the wired client is not authenticated currently. It's just connected to a port, right? You didn't get prompted for any sort of ID, did you?
Well, I did not get prompt just yet, but while I opened my browser, because the browser automatically tried to reach the internet, let me show you here. I suddenly received an authentication required in order to reach the internet.
Excellent. So let me just open up a configuration here for unauthenticated access, right? So give access to the intranet server. Be typing the maybe using the wired network again for that. And I think we can put the Corp Wi-Fi also. It doesn't really matter because those are already authenticated. All right, so now we have, you should be able to reach the 21 address without any authentication, but you'll be getting an authentication if you try to reach the secure server, right? So
okay,
let's review the experience you're getting at this point.
Let me try to do that. So let's go on the browser. So you're saying that I should be able to reach .21 without authentication.
That is correct.
The page I just received is anyone can access this page.
Correct. So that is the intranet server. It's quite the fancy intranet, right? So it's got a simple message. The purpose really here was to show that anyone should be able to reach that server without authentication.
We understand what's going on, but when you say without authentication, you have to realize that either you're sitting on a private network, which in this case is the LAN port, so physically have access to that LAN port, or as we will see on the wireless laptop, you still need to go through 802.1x authentication and know which user is getting to the server.
And obviously those wireless laptops, and we'll be connecting one in a moment here. But the notice that we have these two policies here. The first one is the unauthenticated access from both interfaces, whether it's a wired or wireless client. We are allowing access to the 21 address, right, without any sort of authentication. If you look at the source field, it's just an all address object for anyone to basically connect to that. As contrast to the second two policies, which require that there be a Wi-Fi authentication. So that's a convenient group that we've created that contains you as a user alone right now. It could technically point to an 802.1x, an NPS server from Microsoft or any other radius server like FortiAuthenticator in order to perform radius or LDAP authentication. We're just using a local account here with the integrated EAP proxy later. So that policy requires that there be an identity and that the person be an identified user of that group. So Guylain, why don't you go ahead and connect that wireless laptop of yours?
Well, before I do that, Mathieu, let me show you what happened if I try to access now my secure network, which is the .20, right? That's the one you've protected.
That is correct.
From the same laptop that I was able to get to the server called intranet without authentication. If I try to go to the secure server now, I get prompted, and hopefully, Mathieu, you can see that on the screen.
I can.
It's a captive portal that requires me to authenticate. So the same group that I'm part, either in LDAP, but in this case called Wi-Fi, the username I think you've put for me was Guylain, and I will type in.
It's a secret password. It's Fortinet.
And I will type in the password that you've provided.
Yep.
Well, I get authentication fail. Let me try that again. I'm typing with one hand only.
That might not be helping.
Here we go.
There we
you
go.
You should only be able to access this page if you were authenticated by the firewall. So why don't you show us, Mathieu, what happened on your side once I'm authenticated?
Of course. So if we go and look at the Wi-Fi clients, we will see that there's still a single client, which is Guylain's connected computer, which is currently wired. I'll just wait for that page to load here. All right, and so that computer exists as a wired client. What's been added, however, is that we have a firewall authentication rule, which was hit and triggered. And so if we look in the status window, I believe I've added that plugin here. So we have a firewall users page, which should be showing us that the 74.2 address now has Guylain as an user. And there we go, right? So 52 seconds ago, you authenticated to the firewall, and you're now a member of that Wi-Fi group, right? So you've joined that Wi-Fi group, which is going to be incidentally the same that we're using for .1x in a moment, right?
Correct. So I can do that right now if you're ready for me to try to connect to the Wi-Fi.
I am very eager to see that. So let's go back to the Wi-Fi client panel.
Let me take my phone here and show you that right now the MacBook that I'm using is not connected to any network. I will connect to... What is the SSID method that you've provided? I have a lot of
Corp
SSID.
Wi-Fi.
Corp Wi-Fi. Okay, so let's click on Corp Wi-Fi. Now, let me try to show you that I get prompt for WPA2 Enterprise credential, which is essentially 802.1x. So I will go ahead and type that same username that you've provided to me.
While you do that, I'm just showing the configuration here. So we have an SSID that's it's called Corp Wi-Fi, which is in WPA2 Enterprise mode and has a local authentication parameter with a group called Wi-Fi, right? So you could have multiple groups in here. This is basically for not normally the intended way to configure this. You would generally have a Radius backend servicing authentication for this Radius backend that would support EAP. So an 802.1x, so that would be either FortiAuthenticator, or you could use Microsoft NPS or any other Radius server that is supported and provides Radius as a service, right? So that's the simple configuration we have here. It's just a single account locally.
I don't know if it's clear for you, but I'm connected
Yep.
to the Wi-Fi. Here's the IP address I've received, 192.168.73.2.
That sounds about right. Let me just take a look at the Wi-Fi clients panel. And there you are. So I have you connected from Guylain's MacBook Pro.
Oh no, so now you see the two devices that I have.
Yes, we do. So we have you as a user here, clearly on a channel. So this time as a wireless user, and using 3.1 megabits of traffic at minus 75 dBm. All right. So let me just click on that account here. What can I see from this here? Wow. So this single pane of glass view is everything having to do with wireless and even your traffic.
Wow, I'm scared now, Mathieu. That means you pretty much know what my device is doing, which is the reality when I sit in the office, right? You don't want your employee to go out to the internet and have access to just about anything. You filter their application, and that's exactly what you see here is all the application that I've been using.
Indeed. So we can tell that obviously all the session information is there, but even the live bandwidth, the live signal strength noise ratio, right? So all this information is shown. We covered all of our scenarios now. I think your phone is the scenario that we haven't really discussed.
So I have one more scenario to test with here, and if I look at my phone here, it seems like just as usual when I'm in the office, I do get SIP registration. At least that's the impression that I have. What is your admin extension, Mathieu?
Let me try and get that for you here.
I believe you are 293, if I'm not mistaken. Let me try to do 293.
My office phone. Well, wouldn't you hear that? That's a phone ringing. Hello, Guylain.
Hello, Mathieu. Oh, I'm doing very good now. Now that I see that all our tests has been completed, I guess I can get started and work for the next 3 weeks from home.
Oh, hold on. Guylain, I have Guylain on the line. Do you want to talk to him? Okay.
Well, I'm really amazed and impressed, Mathieu. This is very cool.
I think we're done here. So if we look at the various statistics, what's really awesome is that if I drill down in any of our wireless users, so just go back to the Wi-Fi section here quickly. So if we look at any of these panels, they're actually drill down panels. That's actually a new feature coming up in 6.4. Whereas if I click on any of these charts, we're going to be able to see the list of clients that are essentially by topic here. So right now I have clients by FortiAP. We have a single access point, so that should only be displaying a single client here. And if we drill down to that client, again, we're going to get the same panel from earlier where we can see all the applications that the client is going to, his various destinations, the policies that the client is hitting, and right down to the log information that we should be able to pull from that, right? So there you go. That's a lot of consolidation right for you, eh?
Okay. Yes. So, Mathieu, I need to get to work. It was really a pleasure working with you, but I hope I won't have to call you again because my setup is fine.
Great. I am looking forward to see you working.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Guylain. Bye-bye. Combien de temps? Combien de temps qu'on a fait? Hey, c'était bon, ça.